I just wanted to welcome everyone here to Smith, Gambrell, and Russell. We're very pleased to host the breakfast today, and also wish everyone a happy Finnish Independence Day. It's the 105th anniversary of Finnish independence. I think this year has demonstrated what a great feat that is, to be in the shadow of the bear all these years and maintain your independence. But we're very pleased to have the World Affairs Council here as co-sponsor. Also co-sponsors the Finnish American Chamber. Jarmo Kamarainen here is president. We appreciate his sponsorship. And it's always a pleasure to welcome Ricky Bennington here. Ricky, thank you very much for organizing this. Ricky will be our MC today.
Well, thank you so much, John, and thank you to Smith Gambrell and the Finnish American Chamber of Commerce Southeast. I'd like to recognize a World Affairs Council of Atlanta board members. Thank you for being here. And we have two chairman circle members, Ramesh Subramanian and Keith Valentine. Thank you. The World Affairs Council of Atlanta is a nonprofit, nonpartisan forum for informed discussion of global affairs that impact Metro Atlanta. And of course, as always, we're supporting the city's transformation into an economic hub. Okay, that's not okay.
I'll read a brief bio. I will read a brief bio of Major General Toveri before he gives us what looks like a fantastic slideshow. We've brought in a military guy. It means we're going to get military maps. So start taking notes now. It's going to be great. So we're really looking forward to it. Major General Pekka Toveri, a native of Helsinki, served his national conscript service in the Fusima Light Infantry Battalion in Santa Hamina, Helsinki. He was promoted to the rank of Reserve Second Lieutenant in 1982 and then attended the Defense Forces Cadet School in Helsinki. Upon his graduation in 1985, he was commissioned as an Armored Corps Lieutenant. As the Chief of Defense Intelligence, he also owned the Joint ISTAR and Targeting Support Development Program. Major General Toveri retired from this position in the beginning of 2021. And I will also let you know, if you happen to watch Finnish television now and are looking at any coverage of the Ukrainian war, the Russian war in Ukraine, you'll probably see Major General Toveri. He is a sought after expert and commentator on all issues military right now, especially as we're looking for the best information possible. We're pleased to bring it. Major General Toveri.
Okay, dear sponsors, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the great honor of being here to talk to you this morning about a topic which I like to talk about. Did it for 40 years in the service, and as mentioned last year, as a chief of Intel. Small disclaimer: I'm not really an Intel guy. I'm an armor officer, otherwise healthy. Being armor officer in Finland means that I can talk much faster than I can think. If any difficulties understanding with my universal bad English, please stop me by making questions or something. And yes, I'm being an armor guy. I'm far too simple to be Intel. I can lead the Intel guys, but I can't do the Intel. But topic is the Nordic defense and countering Russian aggression. And I have to say that Finnish intelligence has been in existence for 105 years. And for 105 years, it's been staring to east, not to blink the eye for a second. Sometimes it gets a little dry. You have to put something there. But we always knew where the threat is. And I'd say that the last 20, 30 years were a bit challenging when most of the people in Europe went to the kumbaya mode, thinking that the peace forever has arrived to Europe. Russia is going to be a democratic country, etc. And I'm proud to say that we were always saying that, well, that's not going to happen because we know them too well. And now last few years, we've been going around telling that, well, what did we say? But let's start talking about Russia and how Russia wages war, because Russia is the big security problem in Europe currently. And sorry, there's supposed to be animations. I do them too much, but they doesn't seem to work here properly. But when you look at the war in Ukraine, and first of all, you have to remember that the war started in 2014. You know, Putin had decided that Ukraine can slip to West, and he started operations to do that, select a proper President Yanukovych who will stop this nonsense about joining EU and integrating the West. And when it failed, when the people took the power to their hands and threw Yanukovych out and make Ukraine a democratic country, he revenged by taking Crimea and starting a war in Ukraine. And this, what we are seeing now is a Russian offensive which started on 24th of February. And when you look at the war, it's surprisingly traditional war. You know, military was always accused that military always prepares for the previous war. Well, this looks pretty much like the previous war. It's fought with armor, artillery, rocket artillery, infantry in main roles. Air Force and Navy are surprisingly passive, mainly because the Russian Air Force and Navy don't know how to do their business, luckily. UAVs were thought that UAVs will change the war. Everybody was thinking about war in Kafkas between Armenia and Azerbaijan 2020, where UAVs had a big role. Well, they haven't been in a big role. They are quite small role, no role at all in operational level, and in tactical level, the drones, the commercial drones have had some effects. Everybody was also worried about Russian cyber warfare capabilities. Well, it turned out that they weren't that great. They have done over 4,500 cyber attacks against Ukraine with very, very small and minor results. Information warfare has been demanding and important, and it's been especially important for Ukraine because Ukraine won the information warfare and info ops phase in the very beginning, and that has guaranteed the Western support to Ukraine. Of course, Russians make it much easier for Ukrainians because Ukrainians don't have to come up with any stories what the Russians could do. They just tell what Russians are doing in Ukraine, and every normal person turns immediately to support Ukraine. The Ukrainians have shown great initiative and capability to surprise the Russians, and one is their long-range precision engagement capabilities, which we saw last evidence yesterday when they hit two Russian air bases, one about 300 miles in Russia, and another a little bit close. So they have been able to affect Russian operations, and especially the use of HIMARS rockets donated by the United States. Rocket launchers have been extremely demanding, and that's actually turned the tide in the war because that gave Ukrainians possibility to deny the Russian overwhelming artillery capability and its use. You know, on its heyday, somewhere around May, June, the Russians were shooting 50 to 60,000 grenades a day on Ukrainian positions. And if you think, well, 50 to 60,000 a day, is that much? Well, the last 10 years, the US Army, which is not the smallest army in the world, has procured annually about 150 to 200,000 artillery grenades. So Russians were shooting in 3 days the annual production of the US defense industry at Ukrainians for 3.5 months. And with HIMARS, Ukraine could stop that. There are some new weapon technologies coming in. The loitering weapons from Iran, which Russia is using to terrorize Ukrainian civilian population because the loitering weapons are nice, but against capable military, they are quite easy to shoot down, but civilian infrastructure is not so as well protected, so they can be used. And Ukraine has used its own capabilities, and there's a difference. When Ukrainian has ability to hit with precision to deep targets, it's always its military targets, and has hit deep to Russia to military targets. Russia uses its deep strike capabilities to hit the civilian targets, mainly because the Russians don't seem to know how to target. They can't target military targets, you know, a military HQ which changes place every couple of days or even a couple of times a day. They can't locate it, they can't target it, and they can't hit it. Whereas hospitals don't run away, so hospitals are much easier targets for Russians. When we look at the war, how the fighting has been going, the first bullet is what what people mainly see. The military operation that Russia started to destroy the Ukrainian armed forces and occupy the country. And yes, the target was to end Ukraine as an independent country. Not only Ukraine as an independent country, but the Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian language was to be destroyed. But there's a lot of other things happening, and this is a total attack against the whole Ukrainian society, and that's how Russia waged war. It's the information operations, normally targeting 3 different audiences. One is the Russian audience, to whom Putin tells that Ukrainians are Nazis, they are Satanists, they are bad people, you can kill them because they are animals. They tell global audience that the same story, that Ukrainians are bad people, they are not worth shivering in the cold in Europe because of Ukraine. And then they're telling Ukrainians that nobody's going to come and help them. We heard the same story basically in the beginning of winter war, 3 years ago. They did special operations to decapitate Ukraine's leadership. You know, they tried to kill President Zelensky and his government, and they failed. They conducted cyber attacks, as I said, not successfully, but nevertheless. And what we see nowadays is the military operation to destroy Ukrainian civilian infrastructure. When the Russian army can't beat the Ukrainian army on the field, then the Russians turn to civilian infrastructure, which is better defended. They have hit, according to UN, around 70% of the Ukrainian medical care facilities have been hit by weapon systems. And you can think, can this be a collateral damage by accident, or is this a policy for Russians? Of course, it's a policy for Russians. They are hitting food supplies, food productions, delivery chains, transportation system, and now they are targeting energy supply, trying to make the big Ukrainian cities uninhabitable when the winter is coming. And then the stealing. Not only the undisciplined Russian forces who steal anything they can, starting from washing machines, but the industrial level stealing that the Russian government does to steal the Ukrainian grain. All grain silos that the Russians have seized have been emptied. They are mixed to Russian grain and sold to West and Middle East, claiming that it's a Russian grain. They steal production equipment from Mariupol, vehicles, tractors, anything they can, they steal. It's a medieval way of waging the war. And then the poor people who are in those areas, left to those areas which Ukrainian Russians have occupied, and how they try to control them. They are targeting the key personnel. When FSB, the follow-up of KGB, the Russian security service, when they went to Ukraine, they had a list of 45,000 people that they want to liquidate. And no difference what happened in Baltic states in 1940 when they were occupied by Stalin. You want to get rid of those people, the leadership, the intellectuals, anybody who would create opposition against the new rule. So they had a long list of people they want to kill. They terrorize the population through violence, fear, stealing everything. They re-educate the people in those areas occupied by Russia. The schools have been opened. The kids have to be put to schools. If they are not in school, the parents will be punished severely. And then there's a new curriculum, new training program, and you can guess what they're teaching the kids in the Russian operated schools. They do massive deportation of people. People are sent all the way to Russian Far East, and they're kidnapping kids. So this is this is a combination of medieval war fighting and Stalin's terror, and this is how Russia waged war. This is basically the same way they waged war in the first Chechnya war and the second Chechnya. So it's nothing new. Well, the war is not going well for Russia, luckily. And whatever happens in the end of this war, it will be a great failure to Russia, and Russia wants its revenge. We can be sure already now that Russia has already lost Ukraine. Ukrainians will, next 5 generations will remember this war and what Russians did, maybe even longer. And they will never give up to Russia. So the main aim of the war has been already lost. But Russia wants its revenge. As soon as the active fighting ends, it wants to rebuild its armed forces. They had huge losses. It will take 5 to 10 years to replace those losses they have suffered so far. And if they can't do it with the support of West, they will do it with support of China, because they can't do it with them by themselves. They don't have the technology, they don't have the production capabilities to do it by themselves. The new Cold War where we are now in, it will continue. There will be military, economic, and social Berlin Wall between us, the West, and Russia, and it will be deeper than the old one. And Russia will continue to search areas where it can be strong and stronger than the West, and it tries to find ways to create gaps in the United West's wall. And it's not all about Putin. You know, if Putin dies tomorrow, we all know that Putin can't retire. The power in Russia is not changed peacefully. It normally is a palace coup in a way or another. So, and Putin can't retire. He leave Kremlin either in a coffin or through a window, but it's not necessary on his own will. But whoever is going to be his successor, he's not necessarily any better. And I'm pretty sure that if anything happens, Russia is not going to become a democratic nation for a long, long time. I've always said that Russia is not going to be a democratic nation in my lifetime, and I'm planning to live to hundreds. So it will stay as an authoritarian country, and authoritarian countries always need enemy. And West is the perfect enemy because you can spite us, you can kick us, you can call us names, and we never go to war against you unless you attack us first. Try to do that to Chinese, it might be a different story. So they will need the enemy, and the enemy will be us. And they will learn. The Russians are not stupid. They may be cruel, but they're not stupid. And they will learn something out of it. And what they will learn? They will learn, first of all, that the Russian military has turned out to be total failure. Giant on a clay field. It had to be rebuilt and retrained, and it had to be better than what it used to be. They need new operational concepts because the Russian way of war doesn't work. They need new equipment. They need new capabilities, which they don't have. And they have learned that the target country, whichever it is, which they want to conquer, it has to be, and its possible supporters, they have to be prepared there. You know, they had this huge campaign to create the fifth column to Ukraine, to prepare it for occupation and failed totally. And next time they will try to do better. And one thing that Putin probably has learned, that hybrid warfare still works. And you have to remember that Putin waged hybrid warfare against us for 15 years. He has assassinations all over Europe. He had sabotage missions all over the Europe. In Czech Republic, they blew up, Russian military intel blew up 2 arms depots just because they were sending ammunition to Ukraine. He had cyber operations, he had info operations, he had corruption, he had election influencing, and etc., etc. And we weren't able to answer to that because we didn't want to lower us to the same low level that they operate. Now he's tried to use his big army he had built with huge amount of money for 20 years. Well, now we've learned about 40% of that money has been stolen because it's Russia. But nevertheless, the conventional warfare didn't work. The army wasn't capable enough. So he probably returns back to hybrid warfare because that still works. And blowing up the Nord Stream pipelines a couple of months ago is the first step of that hybrid warfare we will see. I mentioned that Russia wants to be strong somewhere. And an area where they are stronger than us is the Arctic area. They have this Arctic-based bastion. They have built Arctic capabilities and militarized Arctic for 15 years. All the other Arctic nations, United States and Finland included, have tried to keep Arctic as an area of peace, peaceful coexistence. And none of us has built any bigger new capabilities. But Russia has opened up old Soviet bases, built new bases, and created the capability to control its own area of Arctic and enlarge its control if needed. And if nothing else, one big reason for their security is that they have the biggest icebreaker fleet in the world, 40 icebreakers. The United States has 1.5. Finland has the second biggest icebreaker fleet in the world. We have 10. And Russia wants to keep this superiority also in the future. So we will see more Russian activities in Arctic in the future when this Ukrainian phase will die down. When we talk about hybrid warfare, this is old Finnish line. This is from 1990s when we were thinking in the Finnish defense forces, what could the Russians do in hybrid warfare? And different kind of sabotage missions, pressure and threats to political leadership, hit the IT networks, disrupt the mass media, election influencing, refugee weapon, etc., etc. And those circled in red is something that we can recognize that has happened against Finland, for example, during the last 5 years. So it's active operations which they're conducting all the time, and it aims to affect decision making. And it's been very effective, actually. And I say that when you talk about hybrid warfare, the biggest challenge, the biggest threat is not necessarily the effects to the population. The biggest threat is the effects to the leadership and political leadership, especially. And Russians know, unfortunately, that in Western democracies, normally the political leadership is the weakest link. We've seen here this in today in Europe, for example. Majority of German population strongly supports continuous and more effective support to Ukrainian nation. The German politicians are not as decisive in their decision making, and that's where Russia tries to widen this gap. But so how to defend against this Russian bear? For us Finns, we know that they've always been there. We have 830 miles of border with Russia. Having said, you have to remember that 90% of that border is wilderness. If somebody is stupid enough to attack across that wilderness, it goes badly. We've proven it several times to Russians, but it's still there. And you just have to learn to live with it and tame it. And how you tame it? Well, when you look at Russia, Russia has this narrative of being encircled by hostile nations who want to conquer Russia. They have this vision that they are God-chosen people who have right to take the smaller nation around them, conquer them, and that they have something so great in Russia that everybody else wants it. I don't know whether it's a crappy infrastructure or bad food or whatever, but they think that we want it. And they have built on that narrative, which they have told their people, that the biggest threat is West. Therefore, they built, this was their defense to West 2021, before they attacked Ukraine. So 2/3 of the Russian armed forces was positioned to the western border against NATO, against Ukraine. And they had 6 of the 12 armies stationed here. And Russia thinks it's as a big power. And big powers never start defense on their own soil, on their own area. They want to push it out. And in good old Soviet Union times, the line was here in between Eastern and Western Germany. So there was a big buffer zone, which protected the mother Russia. Well, after the Soviet Union fell down, they lost that buffer zone. So now the Russian idea was that, okay, we put 2/3 of our army forces on the western border. Then we have these 3 important bases: Kola Peninsula, Kaliningrad, and Crimea. And each of these bases have a lot of long-range engagement capabilities. They have navy units, ships and submarines with caliber cruise missiles, range 2,000 kilometers. They have an Iskander ballistic missile brigades, range 2,000 kilometers. They have anti-shipping missiles, range 500 kilometers. They have long-range air defense, etc., etc. And each of these bases have an army corps to protect it. And the idea, what the Russians had, was that in time of war, from these bases, with their long-range missile capabilities, they can take the whole Western Europe under fire, have the strategic death with the fire, and destroy railroads, bridges, harbors, airports, so that the reinforcements from the North America or from Western Europe couldn't be pushed east to help those countries, NATO's eastern members. And especially they calculated that they create a readiness to wage war. They had these snap exercises where they put 300,000 troops, mobilized them within a week to exercise, which NATO couldn't do. And that was how they thought that they can fight NATO, even though NATO is a much bigger military force than what they have. Well, this is the situation now. They started the war. I said that they have had huge losses. You talk about main battle tanks. Russia used to have 3,200 main battle tanks within its army, marine corps, and airborne forces. They have lost at least 2,000 of those. So huge losses. These three bases, first of all, the army corps which were protecting these bases have been pretty badly beaten. They have like 50% losses. The long-range engagement capability they used to have is lost. They have shot over 4,500 long-range missiles to Ukraine, 95% of them to civilian targets, and they still haven't been able to beat the Ukrainians. And they can't produce new missiles to replace that. So they lost the long-range capability. And the NATO has reinforced its defenses on Baltic, Poland, and southeastern Europe by deploying more forces there and raising their readiness. So they managed to actually destroy their defenses to West. But what we saw in the previous picture is something they will try to build again when this war ends. When you look how to stop Russia and how to control its military might in the Baltic Sea area and the Nordic, Northern Europe, which of course is what we are interested about. I said the most important piece is that Finland and Sweden join the NATO. Because when Finland and Sweden are in NATO, the Baltic Sea turns more or less to NATO's inner lake. And the Russian capabilities to use that as a maritime avenue of attack is gone. There are certain issues that we have to take care of. One is the Kaliningrad. For Finland, these Western sea lines of communications are very important. Ukraine had before the attack about 50% of the Ukraine's trade went through the Baltic Black Sea, and now we estimate that the Ukrainian GDP will drop 35 to 45% this year. Huge economical loss, mainly because they've lost the Western sea lines of communications. For Finland, 90% of our trade goes through the Danish straits. 90%. We many times calculated that can Finland be supported through Göteborg, there's a Gothenburg, Swedish big harbor here, through rail and land transportation. Can Finland be supported? And no, we can't. There's not enough equipment, not railroad capacity, more trucks to do that. So we need those Western sea lines of communications. And for Finland, the problem is the Kaliningrad. Doesn't matter how strong our navy is here, when every ship have to go past Kaliningrad, the majority of Russian Baltic Sea Navy is with lot of anti-shipping capabilities. We can defend that, our sea lines of communication, but NATO can. So Kaliningrad had to be neutralized. And Russia, of course, wants to create a land connection to Kaliningrad. It wants to take the Baltic states, and up north, in Arctic region, it wants to protect its Kola infrastructure by taking the northern Norway. And the easiest way to take northern Norway is through Finland and Sweden. How we know that they think about that? Well, because they have been practicing that for years. All the big Sabbath exercises have included a phase where they practice that operation. So when Finland and Sweden are in NATO, we have to take care of a couple of things. One is that we have to take care of the Kaliningrad, as said, and we have to protect the Baltic states and keep Russia from the Baltic Sea. And NATO is already building a structure for that. They have an army corps which they are building up, which would be in charge of taking care of that threat. Up north, we with the Norwegians and Swedes, we have to figure out what kind of structure we need up north to prevent any Russian aggressions overland towards northern Norway. And it's not that difficult. You know, the distances alone here are quite long. The logistic lines of communications, which have been biggest vulnerability of the Russian army in Ukraine, they are easy to cut. So we just have to figure out with our Nordic brothers how we're going to do it. At the sea, the safety of the maritime traffic in the Baltic Sea, which is very busy area on maritime traffic, and all the countries around Baltic Sea are depending on that traffic. It has to be safeguarded. You know, neutralize all the Russian capabilities in the Baltic Sea, and it's quite a simple task. Up north, Northern Sea area, we have to deny the Russian submarines and Russian naval forces capability to break to the northern Atlantic. Again, shouldn't be a too big challenge, considering that NATO naval force is about 20 times stronger than the Russian Navy is, when you look all together. One big thing is the air and missile defense, because we've seen that the Russians don't fight fair. They don't honor any international agreements about waging warfare, protecting civilian population, etc. So it will hit the civilian population and civilian infrastructure if it can do it. And that's actually for Finland, that's our biggest weakness, the air and missile defense. The air defense is good, but missile defense is not that great. And NATO is building a combined joint air and missile defense system, and we need to participate on that in the future. But after these things have been taken care of, air and missile defense and naval defense, the Baltic Sea region will be actually much more stable and peaceful than it is nowadays. Why? Well, it's because the Russians are not stupid. They understand that the geostrategic situation in this region, when Finland and Sweden are part of NATO, has totally turned 180 degrees around. It's so unfavorable for the Russians, and their capability to actually conduct any operation in this area is lost. They can try, but they can be easily be defended. And since they can't rock the boat here, they will try to rock the boat somewhere else where they are strong. So when we first look how to handle the Russians, we see that we need a strong national defense supported by the NATO alliance. Finland has waged last century 3 wars against Russia, 1 against Germany, and we wouldn't have survived any of those without the foreign help. So fighting alone, a small nation against big nation, is not easy. So the joining the NATO alliance makes sense. Nevertheless, joining NATO is not the solution by itself. You have to put your own effort to the defense. You have to have strong national defense. If nothing else, because Finland is up north. We are in a cul-de-sac of Europe. It's far away to Central Europe where there are many help to. So we have to be able to fight for months alone before we can count that there's any support coming. And then you have to have the capability to defend the vital infrastructure of your country. You know, you need to have a large reserve. We have a large reserve force because we have the general conscription. You need to have spare capabilities for the defense. You know, having a lot of manpower is not enough. You still have to have high technology systems, and we do have. We have currently F-18s fleet, NASAMS air defense systems, MLRS systems, special forces, etc., etc. Finland is actually, we have decided to procure F-35s, 64 of them, 10 billion euros. We decided to build 4 Navy frigates with the US systems, about a couple of billion euros. We just decided to procure a couple of weeks ago 2,400 guided MLRS rockets from the United States. 350 Stingers, etc., etc. Finland is probably the per capita the biggest procurer of US military material in Europe. And we are also the biggest user of MLS rockets in Europe after Ukraine, and we will be the third biggest F-35 fleet in Europe. So, and we are a nation of 5.5 million. So we punch above our weight pretty well. But that's the idea. We have a big reserve, 260,000 reservists if needed, but then you need also this modern capabilities to fight the war against country like Russia. You need to have a very close cooperation within your authorities. You know, the police, border guards, military, all the civilian authorities who are responsible for IT networks and so on. We have a long historical tradition of cooperating very closely and preparing the difficult threats. And that needs to be even improved more. You have to have a resilience of the society. So when the Russians attack and hit your infrastructure, you have to have a capability to repair the damage, and you have to have the capability to protect your population. And again, here we are pretty good because we have the historical background. You know, we haven't forgot what the Russians did in the Second World War. So we still, by law, if you build a block of flats in Finland, you have to build a shelter. So we have shelters for basically every Finn in Finland. By law, if you build a bridge in Finland, you have to prepare it for demolition. If you want to do, if you want to have an IT company or some other company which actually is part of the vital infrastructure in Finland, by law you have to be prepared to run the company also in time of war, and certain preparedness have to be taken care of. And this kind of measures makes it easier to protect your infrastructure. You have to take care of your cyber defense. You have to take care of the information defense. And as said, the Russians try to create the gaps on the unity of your nation and unity of your alliance between the people and the politicians. And you have to prepare for that in your information defense. But I say that the big picture is that joining NATO is a easy fix for the military threat, because NATO is a very strong military alliance. It's the most successful military defense alliance in the world history, I'd say, and the strongest one too. It gives deterrence and protects against military attacks in the Euro-Atlantic area. And it gives you the nuclear umbrella, which is important because when Putin has lost everything else, he still have the 1,500 nukes available. But since the threat is not only the military threat, but it's also the hybrid threat against our society and our people, I'd say that EU is very important, at least in Europe. It's a strong global foreign policy and economical actor. It has a legislative power, and it can support, like in Ukraine's case, for example, EU's economical support and humanitarian support to Ukraine has been very important. So it can give both the economic support, and it also gives you tools to hit and fight against the hybrid threats if you get the EU to work more properly. And both of these organizations are needed in the future to protect the security of the democratic countries, at least in the Western Europe area. So, just shortly, how we in Finland see that we have to deal with this Russian threat. It's been there last 1,000 years. And now if there's any questions.
Yes, we thought that we would pull the podium away so we can sit and talk and then invite the audience for questions, if that works logistically. Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much.
Finland sounds like a nation that has hoped for the best, but really prepared for the worst. What is it about the Finnish culture and history that has allowed Finland to be very sober about Russia versus, as you said, other European countries having kumbaya moments for the last 30 years?
Well, you know, we all are victims of our history, all nations. And you,
I'm gonna ask you to pull this up.
and you look at the history, history for advice. And in our case, we've had around 30 wars with Russia the last 1,000 years. Wars or bigger wars. So, and as I said, 3 in the last century alone. So we learned that threat comes normally in 90% of the cases. Threat comes from the east. We were occupied by them for over 100 years. So we know them really well. And the fact is that during the Second World War, in the Winter War and Continental War, we lost 90,000 fallen soldiers out of a population of 3.5 million. That time, the United States had a population of 150 million, and you lost about 400,000 during the Second World War. So the price paid for the freedom is huge. And it's still in the Finnish heritage. Every family has lost somebody. Every family has somebody who fought in the war, and every family have members who've lost. And we didn't leave the fallen in the field. We have this tradition that we bring the boys back home. So every single community in Finland, every municipality has in the cemetery they have a small military cemetery as a part of cemetery, where every year you have ceremonies to honor the fallen. So it's a national. It's something that you learn from Mother's Milk, that there's a price for the freedom, and the threats unfortunately comes from one direction. So and we've learned that we are, and that's one national trait, that we are a bit slow. Something, and we let things happen. Everybody says, oh, yeah, great, we have a peace in Europe. We are like, well, let's see next 30 years and then maybe start celebrating. Be skeptical. Well, you are living up north. It's cold and everybody dies. So be pessimistic. You fare better.
I find it interesting that there's mandatory conscription in Finland, and for Americans, it's been a long time since we had to worry about that. Can you just talk about how that influences Finnish defense?
I say that's one of the most important part of the Finnish defense is the national conscription, because that gives you the willingness to defend the country. We have all the statistics. We have the latest polls 2 weeks ago. We do this annual poll where people are asked that should Finland take armed resistance if we are attacked, even if the end result is unsure, meaning that we may lose. And 2 weeks ago, it was 83% of the people said that yeah, we should fight. And the statistics clearly show that those who have served has much higher percentage of them say yes than those who haven't served. So it builds the national willingness to defend. And again, it makes it a national business. When I was serving here from 2016 to 2019 in DC as the defense attaché, and we met General Mattis when he was the Secretary of Defense couple of times. And he always said that if you're a global power and you need to deploy new capabilities fast around the globe globally, professional army is great. But he said that the problem is that if you need to defend your homeland, you have only 1% of the population participating. Whereas in general conscription, almost every family participates in it, and it becomes a national business. And that's what we have. We are living next to the aggressive big power. During the Second World War, in height of the Second World War, 16% of the Finnish population served in the defense forces. And we learned, and 50% of the gross national product went to defense. And we learned that as a small nation to survive against a bigger one, you have to take all the national resources into use. And general conscription is one way to do it, to get the manpower, to get the willingness. And it's very important, because when you look then the civilian resilience part, practically all the CEOs of the bigger Finnish companies, they are reserve officers. But almost everybody. They are not in an active reserve anymore. Probably if you are pushing over 40, you are not in active reserve anymore. But they've served and they know what armed forces need, defense forces need. So they actively can come up with things what my business can do, or what in my municipality what we can do to support the defense forces, or if we have a problem, what others can do to help us. And again, you have to remember that Finland is a village. It's a size of Wisconsin, more or less, the population. Everybody knows each other. So it's very, very easy to have this trust between the different organizations. And it's very easy to do legislation, for example, for cyber defense and whatnot, because it's much less complicated than in federal structure that you guys have here.
Why don't we go to questions?
I have a question. You talk about Sweden and Finland joining NATO. That's going to be a very tough one to swallow for Russia. I remember I was posted in Stockholm for 3 years, so I got a glimpse of what the Nordic states are. And if we have a saying in Mexico, too close to the United States, too far away from God. I think that doesn't apply to the Nordic states because we're too close to Russia, but not too far away from God. You have been able to ascertain yourself and be very successful at that. But I was thinking about Sweden and Norway and Finland joining NATO. Remember when NATO wanted to put radars in the Czech Republic and Poland? It was huge. I mean, the Russians went to the roof, and they were comparing the situation with the missile crisis in Cuba in 61 or 62, I don't know. And well, this is going to be tricky. I don't know. It needs to be because Russia needs to know that they cannot do whatever they want, whenever they want. But the reality is that in the international arena, we are not doing anything. I mean, we are condemning and we are saying, oh, this is bad. We don't agree with you going to war with Ukraine. And in the United Nations, nothing is happening. As long as Russia has veto in the Security Council, nothing is going to happen. And the rest of the world is really not doing much. And we have a humanitarian crisis, we have a supply crisis because of all the food and grains and things that Ukraine produces. And we are not doing a lot. So I want your insight, and I'm talking strictly not on my official capacity, just as a citizen of the world.
And Patricia is with the Mexican consulate.
Yeah. Well, I'd say that, the thing with Russia is that the Russians understand only power. I know that they have a word for please in Russian language, but they really don't use it. Going to negotiation with Russia and saying please is waste of time, everybody's time. You go there with a freaking big stick and you said, I will hit you so hard that you bleed unless, if you don't start to behave. That's the only way to deal with them, and we've seen that. Russia will always be provocated. They always say that this is a provocation, whatever. If you raise your readiness, it's a provocation. If you don't raise your readiness, it's a provocation. They always find a reason to start the war, and they always lie. We've seen it. We've all seen it. Before the attack, but we are not going to attack. Both Lavrov, the Secretary of State, and Putin said we are not going to attack, and somebody claiming that it's a Russophobia, and then they attack. So only way to deal with Russia is with power. You show power, and you show that I'm ready to use this. If I'm not going to attack you, but if you attack me, you pay the price. Unfortunately, that is how it is, and they play this game so well. Even in the early 2000s, when Russia still was starting to build the military capabilities, Putin played this poker with empty hand, and everybody was treating him like he would have 5 aces in his hand, because they are cunning. That's how to say. You have to remember, he's an old KGB guy. They know us much better than us, and that's a normal mistake that the Western politicians do. They look at, they look like us, and they wear same kind of suits, and some of them speak really good English, so they must think like we. Well, they don't, and they don't act like it's a mafia state. Everybody lies. Everybody looks an angle weakness in the West, and they use it for their advantage. As a professional military and running an intel organization, and we knew very well what they are, how they operate, what they do. It was sometimes painful to look to international conferences where Russians played this game, and everybody was treating them like they would be a real nation with real intention, and they really can't be trusted. No, you have to just start to treat them like what they are. They are mafia. And you treat them like mafia, then it comes easier.
Next question?
I have a question, yeah. What is the timing and your prediction for being a military, a NATO military alliance vis-a-vis Turkey?
Well, I said, I'm talking about the Finnish, Finland joining NATO and Turkey opposing it, or?
Yes.
Let me just add, 30 nations need to approve their entry, Finland and Sweden's entry into NATO. Everybody's voted except for Turkey and Hungary as well. And I think that's the context of your question.
And when, timing wise, if things go well, yeah, you got the question, thank you.
I think that, President Erdogan is like any also, wannabe dictator or dictator. He thinks only about himself. In Erdogan's case, there's elections coming. The Turkish economy is not doing well. There's been a lot of opposition raising against him. So he needs something to safeguard. And all the dictators or wannabe dictators, they are thinking only about staying in power. They don't think about their people or any other interest. They just want to stay in power, So he's thinking that he needs something before next elections to show that, well, I'm an important man. The West listens to me, and I can make these rich Nordic guys to run in circles because I have something that they want. So he wants something out of it, a political power, something for next elections, and of course he wants the F-16s from the United States. So he's like a shopkeeper in bazaar. He's doing this game and trying to gain something. But I'm 100% sure that some people say that he's working for Putin. No, the Turkish and Russian interests are conflicting very much in Northern Africa, in the Middle East. There are some areas where they have some areas where they have interests that are in line, but a few mainly they are conflicting. And he's not working for Putin. He's doing this just for himself. And I think that before the NATO summit, they will ratify it. And I think that the big boys have told him that you can have this game and play this game, but by NATO summit, this has to be ratified and taken care of.
Is that in the spring? April?
It's in July in Vilnius, in Riga. Vilnius in Lithuania. Yeah.
We have another question here, and we'll take both of you. And would you mind introducing yourself?
I'm Katina Kudrita, and I'm originally from Vilnius, actually. So you mentioned Vilnius. So I do have a question about Finnish support for Ukraine, right? I mean, in the case of Lithuania, there was lethal support given after even 2014. So is Finland giving any lethal support to Ukraine? What kind of support is
It's actually.
What kind of support is Finland giving to Ukraine? Is it giving lethal weapons? What kind of support?
Yeah, we have, of course, we give economical and humanitarian aid, but Finnish Defence Forces have sent 10 packages so far to Ukraine, including light handling weapons, artillery, APCs, ammunition, etc., etc. So it's quite extensive amount of material we have sent to Ukraine. One reason being that we have a lot of material that Ukrainians can use because for example, a lot of our artillery is actually from old Soviet times. So we have a lot of ammunition which fits the Ukrainian artillery. So we've given a lot of that stuff. And it's always an uneasy balance. I know that my colleagues who are still in service, they are like, we'd like to give more, but we have a big wartime army, and the Russia is still there. But they are giving more, and I think the idea is currently is that we have 5 to 10 years time in Finland where Russia don't have any credible capability to do any offensive towards Finland. The army is tied up in Ukraine and they've beaten badly. The air force sucks, for lack of better word, and the naval capabilities are not that great. So we have 5 to 10 years window of opportunity to give material to Ukraine, and then we have 5 to 10 years to replace that material later. And I think it's close to good use, because every single tank destroyed, Russian tank destroyed in Ukraine is one less in the Finnish border.
Yeah, thank you. Very informative speech. My name is Mark Borelli. I spent about 6 months in Finland in 2003 selling a company there, so I got to experience quite a lot of the country. I wanted to get your opinion. I'm listening to an article, commentary the other day saying that, well, whoever replaces Putin will probably be the same. There is a concern that if Putin goes, because of the war in Ukraine, Russia could defragment, leading to a lot more chaos on Finland's border, which may take away a big there for a while. But
Can't hear your question. She's got your microphone.
Sorry. What I was saying is a discussion saying that, well, Putin may go and be replaced by someone similar. The loss of the war.
Let's find another mic. They don't have any more.
Sorry. The loss of the war and competing interests in Russia may lead to defragmentation of Russia with various competing interests, which while removes the big bear for a while, may be very destabilizing for the Baltics.
Well, first of all, a few words about change of power and Russia generally. You know, Putin is in a very strong position, even now that the war is going badly. And you have to remember that, you know, there's been discussions about maybe the people will revolt, maybe the military will revolt. Well, none of this is going to happen. You have to remember that people have never changed power in Russia, never. The great October Revolution wasn't a great revolution. It was a couple thousand Bolsheviks making a palace coup. Military has never changed the power in Russia. 1825, they have this one rebellion, decapitrist rebellion, when liberal officers tried to change power. It was crushed. After that, the army has never tried it. The change of power has always been a palace coup, whether it's a Kremlin, during communist time, whether that's in the empire time, it's a palace coup. And Putin is sitting there in Kremlin, and he has about a dozen Siloviks around him, who he plays against each other. You know, very, very Byzantine kind of a court where the things happen. And these guys fight for the place in the sun. And he was very much in the power. And you have to remember that the internal security forces in Russia are 2 times bigger than the Russian armed forces. Tells what the real threat to Putin's power is. So the areas, there's some uneasiness in the far east, in Siberia, for 2 reasons. One being that all the money, you know, especially in Siberia, all the money, the gas and oil money that is pumped out from the provinces goes to Moscow, and they are left with nothing. You know, it's the infrastructure in most of the Russia is abysmal. According to their own statistics, 30% of the Russian hospitals don't have a running water. And you can get this not in Moscow and St. Petersburg. It's all over the rest of the areas, and the minorities especially suffer. They have 146 minorities in Russia. It's a colonial state. You know, Russia has enlarged and taken over smaller nations, which they want to continue doing. And these people are suffering economically, and now they are led white because of the war. Because the people who are recruited to the war are mainly from the minorities, not Moscow, not St. Petersburg. Some of them go, but on proportion, much bigger hit for the minorities. The Buryats is a small minority in Siberia. 0.3% of the Russian citizens are Buryats. When you look at the only statistics that the Russian MOD, Minister of Defense, published in the beginning of the war about the losses of the Buryats were 12% of the whole losses. So they have almost 40 times more losses among that small minority than the average Russian forces. And now more and more of them are dying. There's been some riots in Dagestan, for example, against the mobilization. So there's some uneasiness, but is it enough so that it starts to break apart? I don't think so. They are too small, the security forces are too strong.
there's no opposition, the opposition leaders are all left the country, driven away from the country or in prisons. So I don't think that what will happen is that those countries which are, let's say, in close old Soviet Union time republics who are now independent, like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, those countries are taking distance from Russia, especially in Kafkas area and in the Central Asia, and China is lurking there and supporting them. When the beginning of war, the president of Kazakhstan said that, well, we don't approve this attack. If any citizen of Kazakhstan goes to Russian army, it will be military offense. And immediately Peking said, well, and we guarantee Kazakhstan's independence. That's a clear message. So China is starting to grab those areas which Russia used to dominate. So that will happen. He will lose those vassal states, maybe, but I don't think that Russia will break apart.
We have time for a couple more questions, and I do want to make sure we talk about where China enters the chat here. So put a pin in that. But why don't we go to
That was exactly my question.
we have two questions. Okay, Lewis, and then a little bit in blue.
It was the Russia has a long border to the south and to the east as well. So militarily, what are their concerns there? What's their strategy there? And obviously, one of the biggest ones is, of course, China. But they've always had an interesting relationship throughout the year. So,
well, first of all, Russian defense against China is depending totally on nuclear weapons. They don't have any forces there in a Chinese border that could stop Chinese. So it's a nukes, and Chinese know that. And it's why there's not too many people living there. From Ural Mountains to Vladivostok, that huge landmass, there lives little over 10 million Russians. So there's plenty of room to throw nukes if somebody tries to attack you across the border. The relationship between China and Russia is interesting. There's been a lot of fears, especially in DC, that they find a strategic partnership and starts to fight against West. But there's a certain uneasiness there because Russians know that they are the underdog here. President Xi currently is pretty mad to Putin. First of all, I'm pretty sure that the Chinese had a set date that we will take, by this date, we will take Taiwan, no matter what, we will take it. Well, now they look what happened to Russia in its offensive to take Ukraine. And they probably figured out that, well, especially since a lot of Chinese armed forces technology comes from Russia, also with and Russian technology, so that, okay, we probably need more troops, better trained troops, and better technology, so the date has moved to right a lot. And now Xi is looking how West is learning how to deal with the aggressive dictator. Put sanctions, cripple his economy, support the country which they attacked with military material and economical aid and training, and let them let Russians fight. And Xi is afraid that West learns how to deal with China when they will attack Taiwan. So that's irritating. Being a dictator to dictator, and China wants to have Russian support against the West. He don't want to see Russia to fall apart and lose, but on the other hand, he don't dare to support Russia. You have to remember that China is a communist dictatorship, and for Communist Party, only important thing is to stay in power. How do you stay in power with a population of 1.4 billion people? Even though you have put 2 times more in the last 20 years, you have put 2 times more money in internal security than you have put your armed forces. It's the economical growth, the iron rice cup. You promise people the better economical things, and so economical growth cannot be dangerous in any way. So Australians trade with China is bigger than Russian trade with China. So West is important economically. Yes, if we would have a trade war with China, we would suffer very much too. But China, Communist Party can't take that risk. Therefore, they won't take any risks to support in supporting Russia, which could cause sanctions. Therefore, Putin asked in the beginning of the war, he asked both economic aid and military aid, and he got none. You know, Chinese are good businessmen. They know that there's no idea to put money in a business which is going out. You know, Russian economy is not that strong. And yes, they didn't want to give military aid because they're afraid that West would put sanctions on it. So they are left on their own devices there. Now China is just waiting and looking. They know that Russia is getting weaker and weaker and more depending on the trade with China. It's a nice gas station where you can buy gas and oil very cheaply, and you can get access to Arctic. You know, China has wanted to go to Arctic for 2 decades, and Russia has stopped them because they want to keep the Arctic for themselves. But now that they're getting more and more weaker and more depending on Chinese, they can't hold the Chinese away from the Arctic region anymore. So it's a trouble situation, and they say that in Peking, Putin was called puppy before the attack, and nowadays he's called toothless puppy because they think that he totally screwed this and made Chinese life more difficult.
We have time for one more question.
My name is Heidi Williams, and I'm with the Finnish American Chamber of Commerce. I have a question about the Nord Stream pipelines. A few weeks ago, the underwater pipelines were sabotaged. And I believe the conclusion by the Swedish, Norwegian, and the Finnish intelligence was that it had to be a nation-state actor. And Russia has been suspected, which logically doesn't make any sense. Why would they destroy their own pipeline? So do you believe that it was Russia and what their motivation might be there? Or could there be some other nation-state actors that might have the interest and the means to do that?
I'm only 150% sure that it was Russia. This is a very typical hybrid operation. First of all, we, the West, are very depending on the undersea infrastructure, both as energy supplies and communications. And Russia has for decades, they have conduct intel operations to locate where those pipelines and communication cables are, and they have created capabilities to destroy those, and they have practiced it several times. So now you have this war in Ukraine. West is supporting Ukraine. What do? You have this pipeline which is useless because you are not going to buy any more gas from there. So by blowing up your own pipeline, you create a couple of effects. You create a typical hybrid operation because you can claim that, well, it was actually the United States which blew this up because they have threatened to do this. So you create this confusion among the Western countries. There are some people who start to think, well, maybe it wasn't the Russians themselves, maybe it was the United States or somebody else. Then you create the fear, you know. Now we have proven that we can destroy the undersea infrastructure very easily. And that makes Western countries to think that, well, actually, how can we protect these pipelines and communication cables? Well, actually, we can. So you create confusion and fear, which is very typical in hybrid operations. And then, why do you blow your own? Why didn't you hit? There's a new gas pipeline from Norway to Poland, which was opened about a week before this Nord Stream attack. One thing is that if you blow up a Western pipeline and you get caught, it's an act of war. And you don't want to go to war with NATO. And you don't want West, because we have used from all the sanctions we could freely throw at Russia, we have used only for a small part. We've been very lazy about it. It's irritatingly lazy. So we could really punish him. So by blowing your own pipeline, if you get caught, you're going to, well, it's ours. Who cares? You know. And what they're currently trying to do, and why they are doing very extensive intel operations all over Europe, they try to find out the weakness in Western infrastructure, and especially energy infrastructure, where they can hit without getting caught. Because you really don't want to get kicked, your bottoms kicked by West. So that's what they're looking for. This was just the first step, very typical, easy, clever operation.
We unfortunately are going to have to wrap up to keep everybody's day moving forward. This has been incredible. A round of applause for Major General. And thank you so much to our hosts, Smith Gambrell, John Saunders, and the Finnish American Chamber of Commerce. And those of you who just started your morning with us, I'm Ricky Babington, again, the president of the council. If you have any questions about the council, interested in membership, interested in having your company get involved, please come chat with me, and definitely sign up for our newsletter at our website, wacatlanta.org. We will see you at the next event. Thank you.